My name is Daniel Cole, I live in Austin, Texas. 3 years ago, I thought I had found the love of my life, but the night she kicked me out of her apartment, calling me broke and useless, changed everything. Last month, I bought her a house, but it's not what you think. I didn't know it yet, but that Thursday night in late October was going to change everything about me. It was one of those evenings in Austin where the air feels heavy, like the city is holding its breath before winter finally rolls in. I'd left work early, not because I wanted to, because I needed to. My job back then wasn't glamorous. I worked tech support at a small software company, squeezed into a renovated dentist's office. My days were filled with broken logins, printer issues, and the sound of that old water cooler that gurgled like it was choking. The pay was just enough for my half of the rent, my phone bill, and maybe some cheap takeout if I skipped lunch a few times. Madison, my girlfriend of 3 years, had a better setup. She was in interior design, good salary, high-profile clients, and a wardrobe that looked straight out of a Pinterest board. I didn't mind her success. In fact, I was proud of her. When we first got together, didn't matter that she was making more, she always said she believed in me and my dream of starting my own business. Back then, it felt like we were on the same team. But lately, things felt different. She came home later and later. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat dinner with me. She'd sit on the couch scrolling Instagram while I tried to make conversation, and when she did talk to me it was often with that tone. You know, the one half annoyed, half disappointed, like you just let the milk go sour again. Still, that night I wanted to do something nice. I figured maybe we'd have one of those old evenings again. Just us, talking over pasta and wine like we used to when we first moved in together. I stopped at H-E-B on the way home and went all out fresh basil instead of dried, but better brand of pasta, a bottle of her favorite cheap Merlot. She always swore she could taste the difference in basil, and she'd joke that it made her feel rich. By the time she walked in, the apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes, soft music playing from my laptop on the counter. I even lit one of her special occasion candles, the one she kept in a box and never used because she said it was too nice. I wanted to show her that I was thinking about her, that I cared. She came through the door with her beige trench coat still on, hair a little messy from the wind. For a moment, I thought she might smile, but she didn't. She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, the one we'd bought together at the flea market, and sat down at the table without even looking at the food. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach dropped. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What's going on?" She folded her arms and just looked at me for a moment like she was studying me under a microscope. Then she said it. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel." I blinked. "Do what?" "This us. I can't be with someone who's stuck. I need someone who's already there." Her words stung. "I'm working on it, Maddie. You know I've been taking courses trying to—" She cut me off. "You've been trying for years. I can't keep carrying you." I felt heat rise in my face. "Carrying me?" She didn't hesitate. "You're a leech, dead weight. I can't explain what it feels like to hear the person you've built your life with use those words about you. It's like the floor drops out from under you. You expect an argument about money or responsibilities, not a complete demolition of your worth as a partner, as a man." I didn't yell, I didn't throw anything. I just sat there staring at the table between us, as her words repeated in my head. Then she stood up, walked to the closet, and grabbed my old blue duffel bag. She tossed it onto the couch, like she'd been thinking about this moment for a while. "You should pack tonight. You can stay with your cousin, right?" The thing is, I could have argued, I could have reminded her of all the bills I paid, all the dinners I cooked, all the little things I did that kept our life running. But I didn't. The way she was looking at me, it was like her mind was already made up. So I packed a few shirts, jeans, socks, my laptop, and my hoodie. I zipped the bag slowly, hoping maybe she'd say something, anything to soften the blow. But she didn't. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching. When I picked up my bag, I turned to her and asked, "Are we really done?" "Yes," she said, without even a pause. I walked to the door. She didn't follow me out. The lock clicked behind me. And that was it. Outside, the rain had started again, light, but cold. I stood there for a moment, my jacket already soaking through, staring at the wet street. It was quiet, except for the sound of cars in the distance. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my chest from tightening too much. I pulled out my phone and called my cousin Nate. "Hey, can I crash on your couch?" I asked. "Of course," he said without hesitation. As I walked through the streets, bag over my shoulder, sneakers splashing through puddles, my mind kept going back to her words. Leech, dead weight. The more I thought about them, the heavier my bag felt, like the words themselves were packed inside. I passed the bakery where we used to buy morning buns on Sundays. The smell hit me, and for a split second I almost forgot what had just happened. But then I remembered, and it felt like the smell belonged to a different life. By the time I reached Nate's, my clothes were damp, my hair was sticking to my forehead, and my shoulders ached from the strap of my duffel. Nate opened the door, pulled me inside, and handed me a towel. We didn't talk about it much that night. I didn't want to, I just sat on his sagging couch, staring at the muted TV, my mind replaying everything. And somewhere between the reruns and the sound of rain against the windows, a thought formed in my head. I didn't want to win her back. I didn't want to beg. I wanted to get ahead. The first morning on Nate's couch hit harder than the night before. When I opened my eyes, the room was still dark, except for a thin line of sunlight sneaking in through the blinds. I lay there for a second not moving because I couldn't figure out where I was. My neck ached from the lumpy couch cushion, and something heavy was pressing on my legs. I looked down. Nate's cat, Pumpkin, had claimed me as his bed sometime during the night. He was a big lazy orange cat, the kind who always looked mildly annoyed at everyone but still demanded constant attention. For a brief moment, before my brain caught up, I thought I was in my own apartment. I thought Madison would be in the kitchen, making coffee in that slow way she did, scrolling on her phone between pouring water and adding sugar. But then I saw the old, cracked lampshade in the corner, the slightly peeling paint on Nate's walls, and I remembered, I wasn't home. I wasn't even sure I had a home anymore. Nate walked into the living room, yawning and holding 2 mugs of coffee. His hair looked like he'd been in a small fight with a pillow. "Here," he said, handing me one, "you look like you've been hit by a truck." I gave him a weak smile. "Feels about right." He sat down in the armchair across from me and took a sip. We didn't talk about Madison, and I appreciated that. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask what I was going to do next. He just sat there, letting me exist in silence for a few minutes. Over the next couple of weeks, my life became a routine of survival. I'd wake up, fold the blanket, put the couch back together so Nate's roommates wouldn't complain, and then figure out how to make enough money to last the week. I took on every shift my boss offered me. On weekends, I delivered groceries, helped friends move, fixed small tech issues for anyone who'd pay me. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat, barely. Even though I was busy, I couldn't escape reminders of Madison. The first few days after the breakup, I kept scrolling through her Instagram, like I was punishing myself on purpose. Every photo felt like a punch. Madison laughing at some rooftop bar with her friends, holding a glass of wine. Madison trying on dresses in front of a giant mirror in a boutique. Madison at brunch, hair perfect, wearing the smile I used to think was just for me. And then there was the guy. He started showing up in her posts about a week after I moved out. Tall, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, always wearing something expensive looking but casual enough to say I'm rich but I don't try too hard. The kind of guy who didn't just have confidence, he had proof to back it up. I told myself I should delete the app. In fact I did, but then I'd reinstall it 2 days later, telling myself I was just curious. Deep down I knew I was hoping to see something, anything that looked like she missed me. But all I saw were more pictures of her new life, and it didn't look like I had been a part of it at all. Even the friends we'd shared stopped calling. I'd send a text to grab coffee or hang out, and I'd either get no reply, or a polite maybe another time. It became obvious pretty fast that most of them had chosen her side, or maybe it wasn't even a choice. Maybe it just made more sense to stick with the person who still had a nice apartment and threw dinner parties, instead of the guy living on his cousin's couch. The lowest moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was downtown, grabbing lunch from a taco truck during my break, when I heard someone call my name. "Daniel?" I turned, and there she was, Madison. She was holding a shopping bag in one hand, sunglasses in the other, and right next to her was him, the guy from her Instagram. He was even more put together in real life. Nice watch, expensive sneakers, the kind of posture that said he'd never had to worry about paying rent late. For a split second I froze. My brain scrambled to figure out what to do. I forced a small smile. "Hey." She gave me the kind of smile you give a distant coworker you barely remember. "Oh hi," she said. Her tone was casual, light, like we hadn't shared 3 years of our lives together. The guy glanced at me briefly, and then looked back at her. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't care who I was. I was no one to him. "Well, we should go," Madison said quickly. "Bye." And then they were walking away. "No, how have you been?" "No, we should catch up." "Just gone." I stood there with my taco in one hand, watching them disappear into the crowd. My face felt hot, like everyone around me could tell I'd just been erased from someone's life. That night, I sat on Nate's couch long after everyone else had gone to bed. The TV was on, muted, showing some late-night talk show I wasn't paying attention to. I just stared at the screen, thinking about how far I'd fallen in just a few weeks. I replayed everything: the night she kicked me out, the words she used, the way she looked at me earlier that day as if I was nothing. It was like someone had taken a permanent marker and crossed my name out of her story. The self-pity hit hard at first. I thought, maybe she's right, maybe I am stuck, maybe I am dead weight. I sat there for hours, feeling small, humiliated, invisible. But somewhere in all that misery, something started to change. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a big, inspirational moment with triumphant music in the background. It was quiet, a slow I realized that this, right here right now, was as low as I wanted to go. I didn't want to stay on this couch forever. I didn't want to be the guy people pitied. I didn't want to keep replaying the same day over and over again while everyone else moved forward. That night, I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened a blank document. I didn't even know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I started writing a list. Learn a skill people will actually pay for. Find freelance work online. Save enough to move out of Nate's place. Build something of my own. It was a rough plan, messy, scattered, but it was a start. I stayed up until 3 a.m., researching courses, reading articles, looking at job boards. I wasn't thinking about Madison anymore. I was thinking about me. Before I closed the laptop, I wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. I'm not going to get her back, I'm going to get ahead. I didn't know it then, but that one sentence was going to change everything. The morning after I wrote that list on my laptop didn't feel like some magical fresh start. My life still looked the same. I still woke up on Nate's couch with Pumpkin the cat sleeping on my legs like he was holding me down. I still had the same job, the same tiny paychecks, the same borrowed living space. But there was something different in me. It wasn't motivation, because I'd had motivation before and it faded. This was heavier. It was more like a quiet, stubborn decision that I wasn't going to stay in this version of my life any longer than I had to. When I looked at the list again, the first thing I'd written was learn a skill people will pay for, so I started there. I didn't have money for expensive courses, but I had the internet, and that was enough. I'd always been okay with technology, but okay wasn't going to change my life. I needed to get good at something that businesses would actually pay real money for. After a few nights of searching and reading, I kept coming back to the same thing. Digital marketing. It wasn't something I'd ever dreamed about doing, but everywhere I looked there were stories of people making solid money from it. Ads, social media campaigns, websites, SEO, things I'd barely understood before. So every evening after work, I'd grab a cheap dinner and then sit at my laptop for hours, watching free tutorials on YouTube. Half the time I didn't understand what they were talking about. I'd rewind the same video 3 or 4 times, until it finally made sense. My old notebook filled up with messy handwriting, arrows pointing at half-baked ideas, and random words I had to Google later. Some nights, my eyes burned from staring at the screen for so long and I'd think about quitting. But every time I wanted to stop, I remembered the way Madison had looked at me when she called me a leech. That look of certainty, like she already knew I was never going to be more than I was at that moment. That memory was enough to keep me going. About 3 weeks in, I saw a post in a small business Facebook group from a coffee shop owner who needed help with social media. He didn't have a budget, but offered free coffee in exchange. I didn't care about the coffee, but I knew I needed something to practice on. So I messaged him and offered to run his social media for a month. He agreed, and for the next 4 weeks I showed up at that shop every morning before work. I took photos of lattes, wrote little captions, and even ran a small ad campaign with $20 of my own money just to see what would happen. By the end of the month, his page had more followers, and he told me more people were coming into the shop. It wasn't money, but it was proof. Proof that I could take what I'd been learning and actually make it work. I used that coffee shop as my first portfolio example, and started messaging other small businesses. Most didn't reply, some said they'd think about it. But then a small gym on the east side agreed to let me run their ads for $200. When they paid me, I stared at that money for a long time. It wasn't much, but it was the first time someone had paid me for something outside of my tech support job. It felt different. After that I started working like my life depended on it. I'd go to my job during the day and come home to work on marketing projects at night. Weekends weren't for rest anymore. They were for learning more, finding new clients, and testing ideas. I barely went out. I didn't buy anything I didn't need. Even Nate started saying he barely saw me anymore because I spent all my time in front of my laptop. But slowly, things started to shift. $200 turned into $500. $500 turned into $1,000. Clients started coming to me instead of the other way around. About 9 months later, I finally had enough steady work to quit my tech support job. I remember walking out of that old office for the last time, thinking about the water cooler's constant gurgling and my boss's endless circle-back comments, and feeling like I just stepped into a different life. My first big moment came when a local boutique hired me for $2,500 a month to run their marketing. That one client paid me more than my old monthly salary. I didn't celebrate much though, I just went back to work, because I knew I wasn't done yet. With that income, I was able to move out of Nate's place and into a tiny studio apartment. The walls were a little cracked, and the fridge made a constant humming noise, but it was mine. I set up a small desk by the window and called it my office. From there I kept pushing. I registered my own marketing agency, built a proper website, and even hired someone part-time to help me with admin work. Month after month, the numbers grew. 5,000 a month turned into 10,000. I started investing in better tools, better systems, and eventually real estate. It was about 2 years after that night on Nate's couch when I was scrolling through real estate listings, looking for my next property that I saw it. Her street, her old apartment building was up for sale. I stared at the photos, remembering the night she'd locked the door behind me, but instead of feeling that old mix of sadness and anger, I felt something new. I felt calm, I felt ready. I didn't buy her apartment, that would have been too easy. Instead, I looked 2 blocks over and found a house. It was cozy, newly renovated, with just the right mix of charm and style, a place you'd look at and instantly want to live in. I paid for it in cash. I stood in the empty living room after signing the papers, sunlight spilling across the floor, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. When I first walked into the house I'd just bought, it smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The hardwood floor still had that faint clean scent from being polished, and the sunlight streaming through the big front windows made the whole place glow. It wasn't huge, but it didn't need to be. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small backyard with an old oak tree, enough to feel like a home without being overwhelming. It was the kind of place you'd walk into and immediately start picturing where your couch would go, what color you'd paint the walls, how you'd arrange the bookshelves. I could have rented it out to anyone. A young couple, maybe a small family, but that wasn't the plan. This wasn't just about making money. This was about something far more personal. This house wasn't for strangers, this house was for Madison. Not as a gift, not even close. She would think it was at first, she would think it was some grand gesture from a man who still carried a torch for her, some desperate attempt to win her back. And that was the point. I wanted her to believe that because it would make what came next hit harder. I didn't rush it. I'd learned over the last 2 years that the best results came from patience. You don't just throw bait into the water and yank the line the second something bites. You wait, you let it circle, you make sure it's hooked deep, before you reel it in. The first thing I did was make the place impossible to resist. I hired a contractor to add a few luxury touches, a marble countertop in the kitchen, brand new stainless steel appliances, and one of those fancy rain shower heads in the bathroom. I picked light neutral colors for the walls, so the space felt bigger, warmer. In the backyard I had the grass replaced with fresh sod, trimmed the oak tree, and added a small patio with string lights overhead. I wasn't just creating a house, I was creating an experience, something that would feel like a fresh start to anyone who walked in. Once the renovations were finished, I had professional photos taken. Bright, airy, perfect. I looked at them and thought, if I didn't know the truth, I'd want to move in here myself. But the real trick was making sure she found it. I wasn't going to send her a link or knock on her door with keys in my hand. That would be too obvious. Instead, I listed it in a way that I knew would cross her path without me saying a word. Madison was still active in the same local Facebook groups she'd been in when we were together. Neighborhood pages, community marketplaces, places where people shared rental listings. I made sure the house was posted there. I even asked the realtor to quietly mention it to a few people we used to know, knowing the news would eventually reach her. It didn't happen overnight. Weeks passed. I almost forgot about it. Then one afternoon, I was in my office working on a client campaign when I got a text from an unknown number. "Is this Daniel? I heard you have a property for rent." It was her. I stared at the message for a moment, letting the satisfaction wash over me. Not anger, not even excitement, just a slow, deep sense of control. I typed back, keeping it short and casual. "Yeah, I do. Want to come see it?" She said yes. 2 days later, she showed up for the viewing. I hadn't seen her in person since that awkward run-in downtown with her new boyfriend, and I wasn't sure what to expect. She looked the same, perfectly put together, hair styled, makeup flawless. But there was something different in her eyes, a flicker I couldn't quite read. "Wow," she said as she walked through the front door, looking around at the open living space. "This is nice." I kept my tone light. "Thanks. Just renovated." She moved from room to room, running her fingers along the countertops, peeking into the closets. She stepped into the backyard and smiled at the string lights. "It's beautiful, Daniel. I didn't know you were into real estate." "Picked it up a while ago," I said, shrugging like it was no big deal. We stood there for a moment, the quiet between us thick with unspoken history. She didn't bring up the past, neither did I. I just handed her the rental terms, all business. She looked them over and nodded. I'll take it. And that was it. Madison was going to move into the house I'd bought. She didn't know she'd be paying me, every month for the privilege. She didn't know that every rent payment would be a reminder to me of how far I'd come. She didn't know that I wasn't buying her a home. I was buying the perfect stage for the final act of my story. As she left that day, thanking me and saying she'd send over the deposit, I watched her walk down the driveway, and I thought about the night she told me I was dead weight. About the look on her face when she closed the door on me in the rain. About all the nights I'd stayed up on Nate's couch, wondering how I'd ended up at the bottom. Now I knew exactly how I'd gotten there. And I knew exactly how I'd climbed out. The next chapter wasn't going to be about Madison anymore. It was going to be about me. But I'd be lying if I said it wouldn't feel good. No, amazing to see her living in a house she thought was some kind of gift, when really it was just a lesson. The day Madison moved into the house, I made sure not to be there. I didn't want her to think I was hovering, watching, or trying to relive anything. The whole point was to let her believe whatever story she wanted to tell herself. If she wanted to think I'd bought this place as a peace offering, fine. If she wanted to think I still had feelings for her, even better. The truth would come later, and by then it would be too late for her to change anything. For the first few months things were quiet. She paid rent on time every month, directly into the account my property manager handled. I kept everything professional: invoices, receipts, maintenance requests. No personal notes, no hope you're doing well, no hint of emotion. She lived her life and I lived mine. I was busy with my agency, investing in more properties, traveling for the first time in years. Life had become something I built, not something I was just floating through. But every time that rent payment came in with her name attached, I felt a small private satisfaction. It wasn't about the money, though I won't lie, the extra income was nice. It was about what it represented. The girl who once kicked me out into the rain for being deadweight was now unknowingly helping me build an even bigger life. It was almost a year after she moved in when we bumped into each other again. I made sure it seemed accidental, but it wasn't. I knew she went to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. She always had, even when we were together, so I showed up one weekend. She spotted me near a stall selling fresh flowers. "Daniel," she said, smiling. "Wow, it's been a while." I smiled back, casual as ever. "Yeah, it has. How's the house treating you?" Her smile softened. "It's amazing. Honestly, I still can't believe you let me rent it. I always wondered if it was your way of, making peace." I shrugged, letting her believe what she wanted for a second longer. "Something like that," I said. She went on about how much she loved the kitchen, how she'd hosted friends in the backyard, how it felt like a fresh start for her. I listened politely, nodding, all the while feeling that moment coming closer. Then, just as she was about to leave, I said it. Calm. Almost offhand. "Well, I'm glad you like it. You've been a great tenant." She froze for a second. "Tenant?" "Yeah," I said, looking her right in the eye. "It's my house. You've been renting it from me this whole time." I watched it sink in. The flicker of confusion, the quick blink as she processed it, the slow realization that she'd been paying me every single month to live in what she thought might have been some grand romantic gesture. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't say anything right away. Finally, she managed, "I didn't realize." "I know," I said, still calm, still steady. "I didn't buy you a home, Madison. I bought an investment. And you just happened to be the one living in it." We stood there for a moment, the air between us thick with everything unspoken. She gave a small, tight smile, the kind people use when they're trying not to show they've been rattled, and said, "Well, I guess it's a nice place, either way." I nodded. "It is, and you've been good for business." She left after that, and I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. The moment had already happened, and it was mine. Later that day, as I sat on my balcony sipping coffee, I thought about the night she'd called me dead weight. I thought about every couch I'd slept on, every late-night learning skills I didn't know I'd ever use, every rejection email, every small win that eventually stacked into a life. The revenge wasn't about making her feel small, though I'm sure she did in that moment. The real revenge was standing there completely at peace, knowing I had turned her rejection into the fuel that built everything around me. She once thought she was closing the door on a man who would never catch up. But here I was, not just caught up ahead, and every month, the bank statement with her name on it reminded me of that fact. Some people think revenge is about loud moments, big confrontations, public shaming, making someone feel the pain you felt. I learned that the sweetest revenge is quiet. It's when you don't need to prove anything, because your life already does it for you. Madison kept living in the house for another 6 months before she moved somewhere else. When she handed back the keys, she didn't say much, and neither did I. I just thanked her for being a good tenant, shook her hand, and locked the door behind her. As I walked through the empty rooms, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, I smiled. Not because I'd won some game we were playing, but because I realized I was never really playing against her. I was only ever playing against the version of myself she had left behind, and I'd beaten him a long time ago. That's the thing about sweet revenge, it's never really about the other person. It's about becoming so far removed from the person they left, that even if they came back, they wouldn't recognize you. And as far as Madison was concerned, she could tell herself whatever story made her feel better. But I knew the truth. I hadn't bought her a house, I'd bought her a lesson.